How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be doing a Resto Druid guide for you. As you guys may have noticed or experienced, you can tell that Resto Shamans are obviously not very good at the moment right now, unfortunately, and it's definitely forcing me to play Resto Druid a lot more. You guys probably saw that we did not do very well in the first tournament, and that's mainly to do because we were underprepared. We try to play Resto Shaman a lot, and they're just so inferior to Resto Druids at the moment that it's almost unplayable. It's actually really, really sad. It feels like I'm half the healer. So I've been playing a lot of Resto Druid, been having some decent success with it. Hopefully it works out for us this weekend during the tournament. Going to be going up against some Druids who are on their mains, so it's going to be a really, really difficult task. But I decided to do a Resto Druid guide because I feel like I'm at the point where I'm the best I've ever been at my Resto Druid. You know, even if I'm not the best at Resto Druid, hopefully some of the information I could pass down to you guys can still, use to your advantage and appreciate. So everything that I'm telling you may not be 100% correct. It's correct from my point of view. Some other people may not agree with me. But I'm going to do the best I can to educate you guys on what I think is correct. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, generally I always talk about at the start of guides, is just the races. If I'm correct, there's only a handful of races you can really play as a Resto Druid. That's Night Elf for Alliance. I don't think you could be anything else. And then for Horde, it's either Troll or Tauren. So I would say the best race for Resto Druid right now is Night Elf. Oh, Worgen too, excuse me. Don't play Worgen. The best I would play, or I think the best for Alliance, is Night Elf. Night Elf is really good for multiple reasons. Number one, you can sneak away and go for drinks whenever you want. And that's actually really, really crucial in top and arena. You just go, you run away, you get in cat form, you shadow meld, you drink, you re-stealth, and you're just gone in a matter of seconds. People cannot stop you. It's really, really, really good. Other forms of Night Elf being really powerful is using shadow meld to prevent CC. If you're fighting against mage teams and you catch yourself on global and you can't shift that polymorph, you can shadow meld the CC. And another really good way to use Night Elf that I'm noticing a lot in the TR is when someone uses Maledict on you and you see that little animation, pop over your head, for example. You see this in the air right there? That was like really laggy. You see that little shadow bolt in the air? Before that even comes to you, if you press shadow meld, even if the shadow meld breaks immediately, that Maledict is not going to hit you. It's insane. You know what I mean? So if you're getting attacked on a Resto Druid and you see someone pop that Maledict, you press Shadow Meld, boom. That thing it's negated immediately, and that's gonna save lives, dude. All right? And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So Alliance, in my opinion, is the number one. For Horde, it's between Troll and it's between Tauren. Now, I know there's some Resto Druids that play Troll, but I personally think Tauren's just better. Troll Racial's a 3-minute cooldown, gives you a little bit of haste. It doesn't really seem too insane to me. I like War Stomp. It gives you that ability to go for that War Stomp Cyclone, which is really, really nice. It also gives you a little bit more stamina, if I am correct. I'm not 100% sure. Increase your stamina by 235. Maybe it's not that crazy, but you get a little extra out of that with Bear Form, so I don't know. It's something, you know what I mean? And then you get that Herbalism skill. Yeah. Okay, no one cares about that. But yeah, so I would say Tauren is probably the best for Horde, Night Elf for Alliance. Now I'm going to go over the talents here that I generally play. Prosperity, always the go-to. I've never played Cenarian Board a single time. A lot of people ask me why it's not better. If you have any Grove Tending, which you should, and I'll be talking about that in a little bit here, whenever you use Swiftmend, you're already getting that hot up. This counts towards your mastery. So people say, should you play Cenarian Ward for that extra mastery? You're already getting that mastery with Grove Tending, and you're getting the extra healing. So by playing Prosperity, you're getting more Swiftmends, which is more mastery, because you're getting that Grove Tending up. And then you're also getting more burst healing, and it works hand in hand, and they're also getting more benefit out of Soul of Forest, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So Prosperity, definitely your number one talent choice. Moving into the level 30 row, Wild Charge is going to be your general choice. You have a lot of options to use with Wild Charge. It's really nice. Just in travel form, you can see me leaping around, kind of similar to the old Gust of Wind, which you can actually use pretty well to kite melee, or potentially even push in for CC or Void CC. On Z-axis maps, you can jump up and then you can leap over things, leap across things, escape from people really easily. You also have the ability to leap to partners. You have the ability to charge to people if you want to root them. Someone's trying to go for, trying to get out of line of sight, you can root them still. Or if you want to leap behind people, generally you go with cat form for the bashes. You leap behind, you can't be dodged or parried, then you go for the bash and you can't be stopped, which is obviously really nice. So a lot of options here with Wild Charge. It's kind of a fun ability to use, using it in the different regards. Renewal is something that I would say is something more defensive. You don't really plan on going for much CC. You plan on being as defensive as possible. Maybe recommend using this for Rogue Mage or something that you think can train you or hard swap to you, where you're not going to really need to be that mobile. So Renewal, definitely a good, like, strong defensive talent choice there. Tiger Dash, I think, lost a lot of value when Wild Charge became off global. Tiger Dash was, like, kind of better for, like, pushing it for CC, better for escaping. But since Wild Charge came off global, I would say Tiger Dash has not really been played at all. Moving into these affinities here. All three are actually used pretty frequently. I would say Feral Affinity not really used too often. In 3v3, we saw a little bit of a taste of it with Gore playing it in this tournament. Generally speaking, though, I would say Feral Aff not really that good in 3v3. You're not really going to have the opportunity to run in as a Resto Druid and try and do a bunch of damage, as well as go for restells for that stun. But in 2v2, Feral Affinity paired with Master Shapeshifter for 25% more damage is a really, really sick combo. And some people may not actually be aware, but something really sick you could do in 2v2 is if you innervate and you go in cat form, for some reason it makes all your abilities cost no energy, so you can just sit here and just spam the most damage, and then with a 25% damage increase in that Feral Affinity, you can literally just go hard as fuck in cat form. Like, you could just trash people. So honestly, innervate cat form Feral Affinity in 2v2 is like insane damage. So that's actually really sick. But Balance Affinity is probably going to be one of your go-to if you're playing like a CC heavy comp. And Guardian Affinity is going to be your go-to if you're playing more of like a defensive comp where you're not really going for that much CC. Balance Affinity is really, really crucial if you're playing a CC comp, because that range on clone, it's night and day. You know what I mean? Going for that CC, that 5 yards. Also, if you're playing against other druids, like playing against other druids, the druid that has Moonkin Affinity as opposed to the ones that don't, like, you can see how far. Like, look at my bash. I could bash this guy from right here. You know, if I wasn't in Boomkin Affinity, I can only bash from like right here. So if someone's pushing it on you, you're going to get the CC on them before they get the CC on you, which maybe allows you to get that clone off, which is obviously really sick. So Balance Affinity, really, really good for getting those cyclones out. Also insanely good for avoiding things like Polymorph. You can cast a few abilities in Moonkin form. You can cast Cyclone, you can cast Regrowth, you can cast Nourish, and you can cast Overgrowth, and you can cast Dispel. So if you're playing Balance Affinity versus Mage teams, and you want to go for a Dispel, sometimes Mage is trying to be really tricky. So what they'll do is they'll sheep your DPS, and then as you're Dispelling it, they're already casting the sheep on you. You might have been in bear form, but since you come out for that Dispel, you know, you think they're just going to re-sheep your DPS, they're just going to sheep you. So if you go on Boomkin Affinity first, and then you hit that Dispel, you're going to immune the sheep, you're going to outplay them a little bit. Also gives you the ability to be in Boomkin form while spamming clones. Like, sometimes when you're spamming clones, like, mages try and get sheeps on you. So you being in this Boomkin Affinity allows you to go for those clones like a lot more aggressively. Just keep in mind that you are going to be potentially a swap target. But yeah, Balance Affinity is really, really good to kind of avoid sheeps. It's almost really important. So I would say try and use it versus every single mage comp if possible. If they're going you really hard, you might need to switch to the Guardian Affinity. But only play the Balance Affinity if you're kind of like doing like Mage Druidy kind of things. Like, for example, if I was playing Resto Druid Windwalker DK, most likely I wouldn't play Balance Affinity into Rogue Mage, because I probably wouldn't even play Cyclone in that comp. You know, I would just kind of let the Windwalker DK do their thing. And then Guardian Affinity, you know, it's really self-explanatory. You go in bear form, you have, you know, your little abilities Thrash and Mangle, and then you also have Frenzy Regen, which is actually going to help you a ton. And then on top of that, you take the 6% reduced damage. So you can definitely choose between these affinities pretty wisely, just depending on the situation. You know, Balance Affinity mainly for CC, Feral Affinity mainly for damage, Guardian Affinity mainly for surviving, just to break it down pretty easily. So Mighty Bash, going to be your go-to here in the 60 talent choices. Obviously a really great stun, allows you to set up CC like Polymorph and Cyclone, maybe get away from people. You can root people off it too. The only time I catch myself ever playing Mass Entangle is if I'm fighting a melee cleave that's like just kind of training me, and I don't have a mage on my team or something, because if I had a mage, they have their own roots. But you could play Mass Entangle as well as Encroaching Vines, and this was kind of a neat little combo that you played last expansion to survive against melee cleaves as Resto Druid. You double root both melee with a an instant root, and then after that root gets broken, they're doing 25% less physical damage for 4 seconds. So you root them for 8 seconds and they come out and they're doing less damage. It's win-win. So that's a great combo versus double melee. If you're a Resto Druid and you're getting trained by melee, you can try and play Mass Entanglement with the Encroaching Vines. Could help you out a lot. Definitely worth giving it a try. Now, level 75. This is something that people ask me all the time. You know, why don't you play this? Why don't you play that? Soul of the Forest is the best talent. I swear you shouldn't play anything else. I'm convinced you should not play anything else. Just for example here. Here's a regular Rejuve, okay? 2300. Here's a Soul Forest Rejuve. 7k. It heals for so much more. People always ask me, you know, like, man, Cdew, I feel like I'm not doing enough healing on my Druid. Make sure you're getting those Soul of the Forest hots up, man. They are so powerful. It is make or break, man. If you're trying to do big burst healing, dude, a Swiftman into a regrowth, that regrowth is going to do an absolute ton of healing. So Soul of the Forest Rejuve, Soul of the Forest regrowth is definitely going to be the most insane amount of healing you can put out. Literally in some situations, you come out of CC, you could just do the craziest healing ever. Like, you come out of CC, you Swiftmen into Rejuve, and then you Swiftmen into Rejuve, and these hots are insane. Then you regrowth after that. Like, look at these hots, 8k every 2.5, 8k every 2.5. Like, it's just crazy healing. That's also why Prosperity is really good for that double Soul of the Forest. But yeah, so I would never recommend playing Cultivation. I think it's bad. I would never recommend playing Incarnation. I think it's bad. I think Soul of the Forest is always the go-to. So 90 row Inner Peace is not going to be used in PvP. Stonebark's generally the best choice of your talents here. 45-second Iron Bark, incredibly powerful. Obviously, a cooldown you could throw out, you know, frequently to reduce damage and increase healing. Super nice. I would say that Stonebark's going to be almost your always go-to. The only exception is if you're playing a comp where you feel like you're kind of standing still, aka maybe you're getting trained and you're not kiting, or maybe you have a Destro Warlock on your team. Spring Blossom can actually be really powerful. Spring Blossom can actually be really powerful because what Spring Blossom is going to do is, if you have enough mastery, you got to make sure you have enough mastery. I would say you probably want like 18 to 20%. Right now, I don't even have enough for it to be worth it, but on Tournament Realm, I have 20% mastery. On Tournament, I have 20% mastery. If you put a Shroom down and you have 20% mastery, Spring Blossom counts. Spring Blossom counts as a hot for your mastery. The regular Shroom doesn't, but Spring Blossom makes it happen. So if you have 20% mastery and you have this Spring Blossom ticking, that means that the 20% extra healing you would be getting from Stonebark is now up 100% of the time. Okay? This Shroom right here is increasing your healing by 20%. 20% increased healing from the Shroom if you're playing Spring Blossom. So if you're playing something that's not very mobile, like a Destro Warlock, this is actually a really sick talent. So the way you look at it is, Stonebark essentially only reduces the cooldown of Iron Bark by 15 seconds, and this is increasing your healing by 20% all the time. So Spring Blossom's actually a pretty decent talent. It's not bad. You got to be playing a comp that is kind of immobile, like I said. You want a Destro Warlock or maybe a Shadow Priest standing still the whole time. You get less access to that Stonebark, but Spring Blossom is just going to give you the most possible healing. So 2 not bad talents there. Definitely something to mess around with. Photosynthesis is something that a lot of people, you know, have talked to me about. I don't really ever try it. I don't think it's good enough. I think it's good in Mythic Plus and PV and stuff, but I think Germination is way too powerful. I feel like if you don't play Germination, you lose a lot of value on Soul of Forest, because sometimes you do have to like Swiftman into Rejuve into Swiftman, and then if you can't put up this second Rejuve and you can't get a regrowth out, it just kind of feels like you're wasting that Soul of the Forest proc. I don't feel like Photosynthesis is good enough. You're more than welcome to try it. A lot of people may disagree with me, but personally, I feel like Germination is just way too good. You know, it gives you that extra healing on your mastery if you have a lot of mastery, which I hope you do. You know, that's going to increase your healing by a lot as well. I think this Germination is definitely the go-to talent. So, honor talents, you play Trinket almost all the time as Resto Druid. I'll play Gladiator's Medallion versus teams that can CC a lot. Like, I kind of like Relentless versus like Shadow Priest teams, especially like Shadow Priest Mage. I like Relentless versus like Mage Druid teams without a Rogue, because if you get blinded versus Rogue, you lose the game immediately. Other than that, like Relentless versus Shadow Priest, Relentless versus Mages without Rogues, like maybe like Mage Hunter. That's probably not even a comp. I don't know. But Relentless is not really used too often. So generally Trinket. You know, Mages without Rogues, but who does that? For example, there was Ellie Mage in the tournament. I don't even think I would play Relentless versus Ellie Mage, because the way that breaks down is like you're not really going to get CC'd often enough. Like, that's not a CC heavy comp. It's like they're going to win maybe with a random Lightning Lasso, which you might need a Trinket. I don't know. So I would say Gladiator's Medallion is pretty good a lot of the times. Mage Windwalker. I would actually probably play Relentless. Maybe I wouldn't play Relentless versus Mage Windwalker. I don't know. Maybe just Relentless versus Shadow Priest right now. Not 100% sure. But yeah, I generally play Medallion a lot. So I'm going to talk about just very quickly Two's talents, because I want to say always use Focus Growth, but I almost never use Focus Growth in Two's, honestly. Two's talents, I generally play Feral Af, and then versus Melee I play Thorns, and then I also play Master Shapeshifter, and I also play Cyclone. But I'm kind of like a spaz in Two's. Like, I don't really try that hard. Like, if you're trying really hard in Two's, you should probably play Focus Growth for as much healing as possible. Thorns versus any melee team in Two's. Thorns is too good to not play in Two's. If you're playing a comp where you don't feel like you're CCing much, you're just going to win with like damage, like you have a Windwalker or maybe a Death Knight or something. Honestly, even Clone's probably good with a Windwalker. You could play Nourish. Nourish is an unbelievable amount of healing. It's so crazy. Probably your most efficient spell in terms of healing. So it really depends. Like these talents are so tricky because you have so many good ones, right? Like Master Shapeshifter is really good with Feral Affinity. Overgrowth's really good to get Hots up for a swap. And then you have Focus Growth, Nourish, Cyclone, Thorns, like so many really good talents. So Focus Growth, in my opinion, is the best for instant healing. Nourish is the best for casted healing. So if you're playing a comp where it's like, I don't know, maybe you have a Destro Warlock on your team and you're fighting a Warrior, I probably, let's just say you're playing Destro Lock Resto Druid, all right? And you're fighting Warrior Shaman. I would probably play Thorns, Focus Growth, Nourish. That's probably what I would play. I probably wouldn't play Feral Affinity, most likely. Maybe I would play Feral Affinity, but I wouldn't play Master Shapeshifter. You just if you can, but most healing possible. It's really hard to say. These talents there's so many good ones. So you could fool around with those a little bit yourself, but Focus Growth is obviously really insane healing, really efficient. Nourish, really insane healing, really efficient. Depends if you want to get clones or not. Thorns versus Melee, 100%. You don't really need Overgrowth in Twos for the most part. I wouldn't recommend Overgrowth in Twos. Overgrowth in this slot, these are generally the talents I play in threes: Focus Growth, Overgrowth, Cyclone. Overgrowth is just something that is really powerful for applying all those hots. It's actually pretty cheap. They recently reduced the mana cost, so you're getting 2 rejuves, a Wild Growth, and a regrowth for 6k mana. And if you look at the mana cost of those abilities, it's actually a pretty good deal. So rejuve's 2100, you get 1 rejuve, that's 2100, 1 regrowth. It's not really 2800 mana because you're losing out on the big heal. So maybe just cut that in half. So it's about like 1400 mana worth. And then the Life Bloom's 2200. Then Wild Growth, that's a ton of mana. So all those hots up for 6k mana is actually pretty efficient. So Overgrowth I really like versus every single mage team no matter what, because they have Kleptomania. They steal all your hots. You want to put all those hots up back as soon as possible. So Overgrowth really good into every single mage team, in my opinion, personally. Focus Growth I use every single game in threes. I think it's too much healing to not use. So generally, these are the 3 talents: Focus Growth, Overgrowth in this slot, and then Cyclone. If you're playing with a mage, you always want Cyclone on your team. If you're playing like a melee cleave comp, where maybe you're playing like Turbo, or you're playing Windwalker DK, or something where you feel like you can't CC, dropping Cyclone's fine. You just got to understand your win condition. Is your win condition trying to CC, or is your win condition just trying to outlive and dampen? If your win condition is trying to outlive and dampen, which generally is Windwalker DK, that is the situation. I don't really play Clone, but you can try and sneak it in sometimes if you're fighting stuff where you feel like you can get it. For example, I was playing Resto Druid Windwalker DK the other day versus Destro Warlock Windwalker Resto Druid, and I was just playing Focus Growth, Overgrowth, Cyclone, because I didn't really think, like, Thorns isn't really that great into Windwalkers because they could swap so easily. I don't think Revitalize is that good. I already had Overgrowth. I could have maybe played Nourish instead of Cyclone, but Cyclone was just good there. Like, I would just clone the DPS they weren't killing and leg sweeps, and sometimes I'd push in for a bash clone to get the kill. So I would just fool around with Cyclone on your own. Like, if you play a game where you're not Cyclone and you're like, man, it was really hard to finish that game, try Cyclone out a game. See if you can actually maybe sneak those Cyclones in and dampening and maybe get some wins. But you don't need to be clone heavy. You know what I mean? You don't need to try and, like, bait interrupts the whole game like Mage Druid, where it's like, okay, I want to go for clone soon. Like, I'm going to try and get this interrupt out of the way. Just sneak in with the bash every once in a while. Try and position yourself where you can't get interrupted, and then just go for those clones. Nourish is something that is going to be probably one of your biggest heals, your most efficient spell. It's something that's really difficult to get off. If you're ever going to get trained, I would not recommend using Nourish. But if you're playing with like a mage or something and your mage is getting trained, or if you're playing against melee cleaves and your DPS is getting trained, use Nourish every single time. If you're ever playing a spell cleave, you should probably be playing Nourish because a lot of the kicks are not going to be used on you. So Nourish is an unbelievably powerful spell. It puts a hot up every single time you use it, and then if you already have all the hots up, it critically heals. Like the amount of healing on this ability is unbelievable. Definitely worth using. You just have to recognize like when you can get it off. For example, Nourish is really bad into Rogue Mage. You know, you don't have the opportunity to cast Nourish. Like versus Rogue Mage, you know, they could swap you. You know, the CS, if you get CS Kleptoed, you probably just lose the game. But, you know, for example, if you're fighting against Windwalker DK and you have something on your team, you're not really getting attacked and your DPS is just getting plastered, you're sitting in the backfield, Nourish, Nourish, Nourish. Your DPS is not going to die if you're spamming those Nourishes. It's just way too powerful. Mark of the Wild is really, really good into specific teams. So Nature, Fire, Frost, Dot, and AoE all reduced. So I don't think people actually understand the power of Mark of the Wild. So Mark of the Wild versus Frost Mages. Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm, that's AoE, Ice Nova, that's AoE. Those are two of their biggest burst abilities reduced by 15%, chat. Think about that. Orb, Ice Nova, Comet Storm, Blizzard, all reduced by 15%. And now I haven't 100% tested this, but Ray of Frost, that's a dot. You channel that, that's a dot. Drain Life, that's considered a dot. So Ray of Frost reduced by 15%. That's insane. Mark of the Wild's insane versus Frost Mages, okay? So, for example, if you're playing against Ellie Frost Mage, which Gore was playing against this weekend, I don't know if he's playing Mark of the Wild, Flame Shock, that's a fire dot. Then you have Stormkeeper if they use Chain Lightning. That's nature damage, which is AoE, which would be 15% reduced. And now, chat, Lightning Lasso. Lightning Lasso, in my mind, is a damage over time ability, just like all the other channeled. Lightning Lasso, nature dot, reduced by 15%. Mark of the Wild, incredible versus Elemental Shamans, incredible versus Frost Mages, pretty good versus Fire Mages. You know, they do the Meteor, they have Ignite. Not bad abilities. If you want to try and reduce damage by a little bit more, Mark of the Wild is not bad. Earthquake, yep, Earthquake. It's pretty good. Also really, really good against Boomkin. Nature, they have Sunfire, which is fire. They have Moonfire, which is arcane, which is damaged over time. And then if they ever use that other AoE Starfall, yeah, which they don't really use often, but yeah. So Mark of the Wild, definitely really, really solid versus specific things. You can rebuff in all forms, which is really nice. And Thorns, you definitely want to try and use versus melee teams if you can. It's so powerful. The way you use Thorns these days, in my opinion, is to counter pressure or to also like deter people from attacking. So if, for example, let's just say I'm playing a comp where I'm fighting against a melee cleave, right? And they're absolutely smashing my DPS. I throw Thorns up, and then they got to think twice if they want to attack that DPS. Another way I like to use Thorns is sometimes melee cleaves like to swap on Triple Bloom, you know? It's like, you know, I'm healing Sam and I'm healing Trill. It's like, yo, or I'm healing Sam and I'm healing Trill and I'm healing Mez. I'm healing a melee cleave. I don't know how to talk. Mez has Triple Bloom, then they go Trill. Trill is Triple Bloom, then they go Mez. They try and swap a lot. Sometimes what I'll do is Mez will have my Triple Bloom and then they swap to Trill. I'll throw Thorns on Trill. I'll make them think twice about swapping, you know what I mean? It's like, oh man, do you attack into the Triple Bloom or do you attack into the Thorns, you know? So Thorns is obviously really powerful in that regard to kind of deter people from attacking. Also puts a slow up, which is not bad, and it does a lot of damage, which is not bad. So definitely a lot of really, really good talent. So, you know, if you're playing against a melee cleave, you could play Thorns, Nourish, Focus Growth, you know? You don't need the Cyclone. Or you could play Focus Growth, Nourish, no Thorns. It's hard to say, man. There's a lot of really, really good talents. Revitalize feels like it's a little behind. Revitalize has decent synergy with Soul of the Forest because it extends your rejuve that is extended. But sometimes I feel like you need to reapply your rejuves before like you tank an interrupt or get CC'd. So like let's just say this rejuve's getting down to like the 3-4 second mark. You know, even if it gets extended by Revitalize, sometimes you just need to extend this, you know? Sometimes you just need to extend this, like, oh man, I might get CC'd soon. I have to reapply this rejuve, right? Like, it's just how it works. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Revitalize. It does like 4 or 5% of healing. It doesn't feel that crazy. I would say Nourish or Focus Growth or Thorns are just better, man. But yeah, so the talents are really, really, really interesting. I'm going to briefly go over my macros here. I'm not really going to show too many crazy ones. A lot of my macros are just so basic. A couple ones that you might like. This one right here, Mighty Bash, Mass Entangle, Typhoon. It's if you respec, it just automatically places on the action bar. Really, really, really standard macro. Nothing crazy by any means. Macros like this are just quality of life macros. You know, you don't have to forget to like put it on the bar basically, which is nice in my opinion. So just for example, if you look at my number 4 action bar, I will spec into Mass Entangle. Automatically switches. I'll spec into Typhoon. Automatically switches. So you can see that macro. All these other just Arena 1, 2, 3, Dispel macros, Focus macro. Nothing crazy here. Yeah, nothing crazy here. Let's see if I have anything else. This is the same type of macro, I believe. Yeah, so if I spec Renewal, just keep it on my action bar. Tiger Dash on my action bar. Quality of life macro, which is pretty nice. Cursor, Ursula's Vortex, just so you don't have to place it. I kind of find like placing things really obnoxious, so I just have it on one press, which is a little bit easier in my opinion. These are just tooltip macros. Focus Wild Charge, I don't even actually use that. These are actually really nice macros for me in my opinion. Pretty sure this macro is actually not the right macro. I'll delete this. So what this macro does essentially is sometimes I don't actually realize, like I'm in form sometimes, like I'll be fighting mages and I'll be in travel form and I'm like, oh man, I need to shapeshift this polymorph. And then I actually take myself out of my shapeshift. So what these macros do is they don't allow you to shapeshift if you're already shapeshifted. So you see how this is bear form? As soon as I go in bear form, it won't let me go in bear form again. You can never unshapeshift by pressing the same button. So you'll need a cancel form macro, which I could show you. But yeah, I think these macros are really nice by just, you know, not letting you reshape-shift. I have it for all my abilities, even Boomkin form. So it's about the same macro, except you change the stance. The stance is just the one that you see. So travel forms 3, cat forms 2, bear forms 1, Boomkin forms 4. Pretty easy to recognize. This is a macro I made the other day just to go for a quick bash. So instead of I was having an awkward time pressing cat form, pressing wild charge, pressing bash. So what this is going to do, it's going to go into cat form, it's going to immediately wild charge, and it's going to immediately bash, just all in one macro. Kind of a nice macro to have there. I think that's about probably it. I don't really have any crazy macros for Resto Druid, from what I understand. Yeah, just general like focus roots, focus clones, things like that. So I'm going to talk about Azerite traits a little bit. Grove Tending, in my opinion, is probably the number 1 Azerite trait. It's just you're using Swiftmen so frequently. Let me see if I can find any games here. Magumbala. Let me look at Healing Done. Cdew. Grove Tending. My number 6 healing. 7% from an Azerite trait. That's 1 Azerite trait, you know. Not bad by any means. Not bad by any means. Super solid. We could look at another game. For example, Tolveron. Grove Tending number 5. You know, definitely worth stacking, man. It's a lot of healing, man. 8%. Not bad at all. Wow. That's pretty solid. Grove Tending definitely really solid. You definitely, no matter what, want at least 1 Grove Tending, because if not, you're not getting any benefit out of that mastery. The way your mastery works is the more HOTS you have up, the more your healing is increased, and this counts towards that mastery. So Grove Tending is very powerful at the moment. Definitely recommend it. Another good one is Waking Dream. 1 Waking Dream definitely recommended, just because you get that benefit of the Ysera's Gift being down to 4 seconds instead of 5. And then for each rejuve you have available, including your Germination, your Ysera's heals for more. So it's just free healing. So other traits that you could maybe use is, I think, like 1 Rampant Regrowth is not bad, just because your regrowth heals for a tiny bit more, and also it's always getting put on your target with Life Bloom. So, you know, so one thing that's a little cheeky to do is, like, for example, if your target's kind of getting like annihilated, I gotta find someone hot here. If your target's kind of getting annihilated, which happens a lot, like when I'm fighting like Rogue Mage, for example, it's like really hard to free cast on them. You can go behind a pillar, cast a regrowth on yourself, and then that regrowth will apply to the target with the Life Bloom, even if you're out of line of sight. And then they're getting that benefit of the regrowth now for the mastery, which is, you know, it doesn't seem too crazy because it's not healing for a lot, but in reality, that's literally increasing your healing by 13% on that target. So one rampant regrowth is kind of like cheeky in that regard, you know? It's like, you know, you just dip off behind the pillar, and now you got a regrowth on this target. That's increasing your mastery, which is like, it's gonna do wonders, right? So that's something like a little cheeky you could do there with rampant regrowth. Some of the other good traits, Bonded Souls is kind of meh in my opinion. Like maybe one of them's okay. I don't really find it too fantastic. But Waking Dream, solid. Grove Tending, solid. One Rampant Regrowth, not bad by any means. I'm trying to think if there was any other traits I found like really spectacular, which I really don't think there is. On TR, I play like full Rampant Regrowth, or I play full Grove Tending, full Ysera's, like 3 and 3. So I don't really know if there's many better traits than that. Autumn's Leaves obviously bad. Early Harvest bad. Like a lot of the traits are just for PvE. So yeah, I don't think they're that good. Honestly, there's one trait. Trade Winds isn't bad. I think Trade Winds is not bad. It's like a mastery proc. It's like 5% healing increase when it procs in PvP, which by all means is not that bad. So yeah, it's pretty solid. It's pretty solid. Pretty solid traits there. In terms of stat priority, there's a couple ways you can look at it. Haste is really good for Resto Druids. Your globals, the way your hots tick. I would say Haste Mastery is probably best for Resto Druid. Only to a certain extent. So I would say like the 20 to 22% haste is like overkill. Like you don't really want more than that. And then like on TR, for example, I think I have like 21% haste and like 18% mastery. Like that's really, really smooth. Yeah, that's just perfect. Versatility is not something that you really need or want. Critical Strike you don't want any of. But yeah, definitely haste mastery. Haste is going to increase how fast your hots tick. It's going to increase your globals, which is really, really nice. Obviously, your cast time. Haste makes Resto Druid feel so smooth, man. It makes those cyclones faster. And then mastery is just insane. Like, increase your healing by 13% for each hot. 13% healing increase. 13% healing increase. 13% healing increase. 13% healing increase. Like, it just scales so crazy. So if that mastery was at 18 instead of 13, that's 5% more on those 4 hots. Like, that's just, it adds up so fast, man. It's unbelievable. So mastery, really, really solid for the Resto Druid. Something that is pretty common these days is like these trinkets are getting really, really crazy, as people always ask me about trinkets. The best trinkets that you could have right now in terms of defense are going to be the Mirrored of Entwined Fate and the Ward of Envelopment, both really, really broken trinkets. You can use them while you're silenced. You can use them while you're locked out. You can use them while you're in bear form. You can use them while you're cat form, man. You can use them with your eyes closed. They just do so much healing. Mirror of Entwined Fate can crit. Ward of Envelopment isn't affected by Mortal Strike. These 2 trinkets are the best trinkets you can have as a healer. With that being said, I would still use a Gladiator's Maledict, which I'm actually using as of right now. I actually choose to lose defense for the offense because the game's like kind of slow at the moment. Like offense is probably a little bit more important than defense. But if you're looking for the full healing, Ward of Envelopment and Mirror of Entwined Fate are the best you can get. Revitalizing Voodoo Totem probably the 3rd best you can get. But I would recommend using a Maledict. Also, if you can play a tank trinket as well if you feel like you're dying 100 to 0 where you're not getting any effect out of this. So you can like run a Maledict and run a Safeguard, which I do on Tournament Realm all the time. So those are probably the best trinkets you can use. Maledict, obviously the most powerful trinket in the game right now in terms of that offense. We're going to talk a little bit about healing rotation for Resto Druid right now. It's pretty simple for the most part. So Resto Druid healing priority is probably the easiest in the game. It's like pretty rare that you find yourself in positions where you have to cast a lot. Like if you're playing Nourish, you can cast a lot, but Resto Druid's like, out of every healer I ever played, man, it's the least casting healer in the game. So it's so stress free. Your healing rotation is obviously you want to keep hots up as much as possible. But there's always like the question you have where, you know, Cdew, I come out of CC. What is the best globals I can press? So it depends on the situation. If you're fighting against a mage, this is like the only situation where you have to change what you're doing. If you're fighting against a mage and he hasn't used Klepto yet, you don't do this. But in every other situation, you come out of CC, best global you can press is probably Ironbark and Overgrowth. After that, it's Swiftmen, and then it's Rejuve. So what that's going to do is Ironbark Overgrowth, you're going to get all that healing immediately. You're going to get those 4 hots up. Those 4 hots are going to increase the next healing of your Swiftmen. That's why you Overgrowth first, because you have all 4 of those hots. And then you have the Soul of the Forest to empower that next rejuve because you already Swift Mended. So that's like insane burst healing. If you don't have Overgrowth and you don't have Iron Bark, obviously you can't use those. You want to come out of CC. The best button you can press is going to be Swift Mend. And if you have two, you're just going to use them back to back. So it's just, oh no, I came out of CC, I'm dying. Swift Mend, Rejuve. Now you got that empowered Rejuve with Soul of the Forest, Swift Mend, Rejuve. And now you have the second empowered Rejuve with Soul of the Forest. So those are the best buttons you could press like out of CC to save people. If you're looking for just a regular hot rotation, Life Bloom is your best global first because it's your most HPS heal if you don't Soul the Forest up. So generally it's just Life Bloom, Rejuve, Rejuve. And the reason you're doing it like that is because you're getting 3 hots up, which is going to give you the most effect of your mastery. You never want to Life Bloom, Life Bloom, Life Bloom without the Rejuves up because right now you only have 1 hot up, so you're not getting any effectiveness out of your mastery. So it's so much better to do the Life Bloom, Rejuve, and then start stacking your blooms. That way you can get the most effectiveness out of your mastery. You want to try and regrowth when you can, especially if you have the instant proc. If you feel like you're struggling on healing a little bit and you feel like the game's stationary a little bit, you could definitely go for a mushroom. Try and, just toss out a little bit extra healing. Make sure, keep in mind, it doesn't really count to your mastery. It's just free healing. You want to make sure that your life blooms are up all the time. You don't ever want your life blooms to expire. But one thing that you may not know is that you can actually reapply your life blooms under 5 seconds and still get them to bloom. So right here, for example, you can reapply them under 5 seconds and you could get them to bloom and you still get the bloom healing. So that's something that's not really common knowledge. Right here. Easy. Definitely something that you want to do. So you can reapply those life blooms under 5 seconds, get the bloom out of it, so you don't ever have to let them expire. Ever. Reapply life bloom right now. You get that bloom healing. Definitely really solid. So in terms of healing rotation, it's literally just all about keeping the rejuves up. Keeping the life bloom up. You want rejuves on, anyone who's taking damage. Honestly, I like to have 1 rejuve on people that even aren't taking damage because if you're playing Waking Dream, you get a little bit more effectiveness out of that Waking Dream. And then if there's any little bits of splash damage or any swaps, you already have 1 rejuve to kind of counteract. And then if people start taking damage, you want to throw in the Swift Mends and then reapply the big rejuves as needed. So, oh, this guy's dying. Boom, Swift Mend, reapply that rejuve. And then one thing you want to make sure that you don't do, chat, is keep track of your Soul of the Forest rejuve. Like right now, you just got to recognize which rejuve is the Soul of the Forest. So my purple one's the Soul of the Forest and my green one's not. You don't want to reapply that rejuve, chat. You don't want to reapply that rejuve. It's really bad to reapply the Soul of the Forest rejuve. Like, you never want to overlap that. So whenever I Soul the Forest, I keep a mental note. Okay, don't refresh Germination. Don't refresh Germination. Don't refresh Germination. Like, if you refresh it, you're losing out on so much HPS. So, like, I can reapply my regular rejuve, but I want to let this Germination tick out as much as possible. Get as much healing out of that as possible. Another thing I want to talk about is Soul of the Forest with the regrowth. It's way better burst healing than the rejuve. Rejuve is better for the residual healing. Swift Mend into regrowth is better for the burst healing. So if you're able to cast and you go for the Grove Tend or the Soul of the Forest regrowth, great for burst healing. There's no problems with using it on the regrowth. It just kind of depends on the situation whether or not you can cast. So the priority for Resto Druid is pretty simple. Keep blooms up all times. Keep rejuves up at all times. Swift Mend when necessary. Reapply the Soul of the Forest rejuves when necessary. Use the regrowth if possible for casting. Drop the shroom if you need a little bit extra healing. One thing I want to talk about a little bit is how to use Tranquility potentially. If you're under a lot of fire and you feel like you just need an extra hot for mastery, Tranquility for 0.5 seconds. You cast it and you cancel it. This right here, you doing that increased your healing by 13% on 3 people. 3 people. So, yeah. Don't be afraid to use that Tranquility. If you go behind a pillar and you want a full channel that someone's in a smoke bomb, if you want to cast it all the way and you have the opportunity to, feel free. But if you're under a lot of fire, just 0.5 second Tranquility, get that hot up on 3 people, drop the shroom, get the rejuves out. It's going to go a long way. It's actually really solid. Trying to think if I'm missing anything. You can use Wild Growth sometimes. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot of mana. Whenever I use an Innervate, I always try and get a Wild Growth with it. I always try and get a Shroom with it because those are your most expensive spells. I think Shroom is like 4,200-ish mana. Wild Growth's 5,600. Those are your most expensive spells. So whenever you use Innervate, try and use those most expensive spells because that way you get the most effectiveness out of your healing and your Innervate. And then I think that's it in terms of healing rotation. A lot of people always talk to me how to utilize CC and positioning. So Resto Druids right now are incredible healers. You can play them in two regards. You can play them as a dampened healer or you can play them as a CC healer, which means you could stay really far back and you could do max HPS and you could push in for that CC every once in a while, or you can play really aggressive and you can go in for that CC as frequently as possible. If you're playing the aggressive version, you probably want Balance Affinity for the Cyclones. If you're playing the defensive version, you probably want Guardian Affinity. Sometimes you play Cyclone anyway. If you're playing the defensive version, you probably only want to push in for Cyclone if you have Bash available. So you're just sitting in the backfield, and then you want to push in for the Bash. You can dash across, you can cat across. I showed you that macro that kind of like leaps you in, and then you just go for it. But like, let's just say, for example, this is the map. You leap in, you go for the Bash. Try and get yourself out of position where you can't be CS. See how I ran behind this pillar? No one in this part of the game right here can CS me right now to stop this Cyclone. You don't want to go for a Bash and cast Cyclone right here. You want to make sure you're always looking to kind of like sneak around a corner so you can't get kicked by anyone. And, sometimes even, for example, if you're playing against melee cleaves, before you go in for that Bash, you shove the Vortex here, you go in, you hit them with the Bash, and then you back off, and they can't even chase you to kick you because you have that Vortex down. So utilizing that Vortex to keep people in place to get that CC is really powerful. And then if you're just trying to position well, it's just whole game, man. Just chill back. If you're playing a cleave or something, chill back and let the cleave do the work, man. You don't ever need to push in. You can use your stuff defensively. For example, a Bash. Someone comes at you, bro. You just boom, hit them with a Bash. While they're back there, hit them with a Cyclone, and then reposition. Just go into travel form, reposition, leap away, get out of there. One thing I want to talk about a little bit is just very briefly, we kind of talked about the cat form, leaping in, going for the Bash. Cat form for the Bash is the best, by the way. It puts you behind the target, which means they cannot dodge, they cannot parry. You're going to always land these Bashes. And it's the most instant. It's the most instantaneous. But one thing I want to note is if you're getting trained by double melee, try and utilize the bear charge. Don't try and like switch out into travel form and like leap to get away. Try and utilize the bear charge. So like, if they're healers in the backfield, you don't have to leave bear form. You can get away like this, and then as you do that, you can drop the Vortex, so on and so forth. But you can actually stay in bear form while using the wild charge to get like more distance while being safer. And yeah, I mean, bear form is just to talk briefly about the forms. Bear form is just all about surviving. It's like you want to go in bear form versus melee. There's a very fine line about going bear form and going bear form too often. Sometimes you have to get hots up, which means like, oh man, I'm getting trained by these melee. Like, this is a really tricky situation to be in as a Resto Druid. You have no hots and you're in bear form. Do you stay in bear form and not heal, or do you come out of bear form and try and get hots up and risk getting stunned? What I like to do in these situations is, let's just say I took a little bit of damage here. I'm getting trained by some sort of cleave. I took a little bit of damage. I really, really need to get hots up. What I'll try and do is I'll try and CC the enemy when I need to get hots up, overgrowth, go back bear form. Or like, I overgrowth and then I like leap away. And then I like Vortex and stuff. So you try and use your CC when you don't have hots up to like tank it. And now let's just say you have no leap, you have no Bash, you have no hope. I like to come out of form with like an Iron Bark. So you come out of form with an Iron Bark, you tank the stun, but you have the Iron Bark available, you have one hot up, and then after that, hopefully you can survive. Talk about what we, the Swiftman is a rejuve, Swiftman into rejuve. So bear form all about living. And then cat form is kind of like the more aggressive, go for Bash, you can do damage. Boomkin form, going for CC, don't tank the polymorphs. And then, yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Kiting as a Resto Druid is basically kind of what I talked about right there, going in and out of bear form at the right times, using your CC to get hots up so you don't get stunned out of caster form. Making sure you use that wild charge to leap as much as possible. I can't really demonstrate it because I'm in flight form and I go travel form, but using the charge to leap, let's just say that's your leap. Every 15 seconds, you want to use it as frequently as possible. But yeah, it's just Resto Resto Druid's a pretty intricate class, but all in all, it's a lot of fun. So I hope this guide helped you out, you know, at least somewhat. I'm a little bit newer to Resto Druid. You know, I never considered myself to be a top Resto Druid. I'm just kind of forced into playing it right now because it is what the meta is. It is kind of fun, but also, I mean, the game's kind of really slow and boring right now. But, you know, I must admit, you know, getting, like, insane Mage Druid CC out on people is quite a bit of fun. But, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you guys have any questions, you know where to find me. All right, boys. That was the Resto Druid guide. I talked like I wasn't streaming because...